right. Hello, everybody. How y'all doing? Does anybody hear me? All right. Does anybody hear me?
Pastor Rawls, I can hear you.
Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. All right. I was like, oh, Lord, my stuff ain't working. Thank you for that right there. Want to welcome everybody to our mental health ministry conversation for the month of January 2024. Thank you all for joining us. And ask everybody that's watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, if you all could do me a favor and go ahead and share the post, I would be extremely appreciative. If you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, go ahead and share the post. We'll be extremely appreciative. I now place you in the hands of one of our the coordinators of our mental health
Thank
ministry,
you. Shut up.
Katrina Rose Hernandez.
Hello, Pastor Rawls and everybody else watching. Xavier, get out of my view, please. They're finishing up dinner. Sorry about that, Pastor. All right, so we are here tonight on our mental health talk. So I was looking for a topic, and I had spoken to Sister Roxalina Rawls, and she told me she had spoken with Sister Dale about how asylums from before had kind of turned out people, and those mentally ill people were just kind of on the street. And so now those people were turned out to jails and prisons. So no other long-term place had been put um, in anything, nothing has been put in place for them long-term. So we just wanted to talk about that. So that's what I made the presentation about. I hope you guys think it is interesting. I thought it was quite interesting when I was looking for things. So Pastor, whenever you pull it up, we
So
will get started.
so let me
Yes,
let me ask you a question.
yes.
I actually didn't look at the presentation. I have it. And are there any videos in the presentation?
Yes, there are two videos in the presentation. I think I embedded them, but if not,
Okay, that's what I wanted to find
they're
out.
probably towards the end.
All right, so if I find it and not embedded, it'll just take a couple about 10 seconds to do a transition to a different screen. But
Yep,
that's the reason why I was asking to see if they were
yep,
embedded. All right,
yep.
I'll go ahead and pull them up now.
All right. All right. So again, our mental health topic is mental health in the criminal justice systems. Are the prisons the new asylums? So we have an agenda, Pastor. If you go to the next slide.
All right.
Okay, so for our agenda tonight, we're just going to talk briefly about early asylums, how they got started, what happened, what went wrong with them, then the criminal justice system and mental health today, kind of tying that into mass incarceration because we know who is being massively incarcerated. So that really affects us in the African American community. And then the criminalization of mental illness. The video should be embedded. I do have here that they are. I'm not sure how they'll play for you, but as you said, it'll just take a minute or two to set up. If not,
Okay.
then a quick discussion and closing remarks. So we can go ahead and get started. So early asylums, and when we say asylum, we're talking about the mental health asylums of like the 1950s. More than 500,000 Americans were confined to state psychiatric institutions. Many of them were for life because there was no cure for that mental health issue that they had. But they kept them just to make them comfortable so they're not wandering the streets as many people do today. Today, the total number of state psychiatric beds in the U.S. sits at around 37,000. So think about 500,000. They've dwindled it down to 37,000. Not that everybody's well now, just that there's nowhere to keep them. There's nowhere to fund long-term mental health um, um, issues or health problems. So a lot of it is like quick. Right now, they treat you, send you out on your way, and you still have those issues. So the mass closure of the state mental health hospitals in the U.S. coincided with the popularity of the medicines that they came up with, those psychotropic medicines that were not necessarily healing and curing people, but they were keeping them calm enough that people could deal with them. There was also a patient's right movement that caused closures, and then well-intended but poorly delivered mental health treatment. And then the community-based healthcare also came along. So the asylum started out as a philanthropic dream. So all these rich people got together. They said, oh, we have this problem. There's mental health people just wandering the streets. How about we build these giant buildings and we help them, with their mental health, their mental instabilities. They paid for many of these institutions to be built. By 1880, 139 had been built in the U.S. The intention was for the asylums to be a place of refuge where patients could come and they thought that if they had a calming environment, fresh air, they could work on a farm at the asylum, then they would be treated and they would be better and they would be able to send them back out into the population. So unfortunately, the moral treatment didn't help. They realized that the people were not leaving better, that they were staying there mostly the majority of their lives because medicine had not caught up with the mental illness at that time or the mental health issues that were going on. And so many of these rich people did not want to continue to put their money into these asylums, so they gave them over to the state. And so the state, of course, they have to worry about cost effectiveness. So they have understaffing. Now there's inhumane treatment. Um, they're doing all these different experimentations on the people with mental illness because the science is just not there. I'm sure you've heard about like the lobotomies they did where they cut out parts of people's brains to try to cure them and help them, and that did not help. Things like shock therapy, just a lot of things that were inhumane. So a 1948 survey showed that a quarter of New York State's budget was going to the asylums by the mid 1960s, and then the U.S. government started to opt into community care instead, which was more cost effective. So new mental health centers were set up, but they were only designated for short-term treatments. And then the patients were sent home with antipsychotic drugs, and that's how they dealt with them at that point. So fast forward to today, the criminal justice system and mental health in every county in the United States, with both a county jail and a county psychiatric facility, more seriously mental ill individuals are incarcerated than hospitalized. So they're, instead of having somewhere for them to be serviced and helped, then the counties are just locking them up. So the Los Angeles County Jail, Chicago's Cook County Jail, New York's Rikers Island, each hold more mentally ill patients or inmates than any remaining psychiatric hospital in the United States. So just think about that. So are these people really criminals, or are they people who really just need mental health care and there's no long-term mental health care for them? So by shifting the venue of the mentally ill individuals from hospitals to prisons and jails, we have succeeded in replicating the asylum conditions, but not in a non-clinical way. And so these people are not receiving proper treatment and they're not really getting the medication that they need. The United States has the highest rate of incarceration than any other country in the world, according to a 2020 report. In 2018, almost 1.5 million individuals were in state and federal prisons, while another 10.6 million were admitted into jail each year. So think about if you take 30-40% of those people and actually get them mental health care that they need, like those numbers and the jails and prisons would decrease drastically. So according to the National Association of Counties, about 3,000 county and local jails across the U.S. admit nearly 11 million people each year. This includes 64% with a major mental illness, 53% with drug dependency or abuse, and then 49% with coexisting both mental health and substance abuse conditions. So then we move from the mental health and the criminal justice system to mass incarceration and how that ties in with the African American community. As we can see by this 2010 U.S. incarceration rate by race and ethnicity, Blacks are much more, like double, almost triple of whites, Hispanics, and then any the American Native Americans that were shown in this this chart. Again, this one shows how when that small pastor, can you see that?
Yeah. It says in 2014, the majority of incarcerated adults were men born in the U.S. with a high school education or less. 93% were male. 93% were born in the U.S. and 94% had a high school education or less education.
Okay, so Blacks and Hispanic adults were overrepresented in the incarceration and population compared to general U.S. households. So incarcerated populations are the orange. So Black adults, 37%, when we only make up about 12% of the U.S. households in this 2014 study. And then Hispanic adults, 22% incarcerated when they make up at that time about 14%. So I just wanted to include this part in here because if we're using the jails and prisons as mental health hospitals and our people who are being mass incarcerated are African Americans, like Black or brown people, Hispanics, then we are the ones who are being affected by this the most. So I just wanted to bring that piece in to let you know who is really being affected by this. So then we go into the criminalization of mental illness. People with mental illness are overrepresented in our nation's jails and prisons, about 2 million times each year. People with serious mental illnesses are booked into jails. Nearly 2 in 5 people who are incarcerated have a history of mental illness. 37% in state and federal prisons, and 44% in local jails. Many people with mental illness who are incarcerated are held for committing nonviolent crimes, like minor offenses, and they're related to the symptoms of their untreated illness. So if we had something that could help people better with mental health, other than just the community mental health where you go in for a couple of days, you get some counseling, you get some medicine, and then you're sent back out. Something that really helped, as the early asylums did when they had the medical people who were available to help. Now, not many people don't want to work in the medical field. It's hard. People are um, they're not appreciative. The pay is not what it needs to be. And so we have all these mental health issues. And so the way that the US works with it or deals with it is just to, oh, well, we'll just lock them up here and there, give them some meds here and there while they're in the jails and prisons. And then we'll call that, mental health help. So before we go on, anybody have any comments about what we've talked about so far?
I mean, what what I've experienced personally, um, it seems that so when I look at mental illness, first off, like when I was younger, and we lived across the ditch from our neighborhood was across the ditch from Takachali, and those are people that were born with, and I can't even keep up with the correct terminology now, but I guess everybody kind of I know what not to say. Uh,
Right.
and so those were the people that I was accustomed to seeing around town and that lived on the other side of the ditch. And but now there's so many people that have mental illness that they weren't necessarily born with, but because of drug abuse
Mm-hmm.
or damage from drug use, I think that population just appears to be far greater than what I was accustomed to seeing in the '70s, and and so and I think it makes up a large part of our homeless population. Also because they're just not able to function to where they can hold down a job or they can pay their own bills and things like that, and then they become a nuisance for certain people. And I guess if you are not willing to invest into caring for people that possibly may have made some mistakes that caused their mental illness, and you're not we don't if we don't live in a country that's willing to make that investment into that, um, I see where we can end up with a system that's really not set up to care for for people with certain types of mental illness. Now, one thing that one number I would like to see, I know like in the '80s when crack cocaine hit our neighborhoods and our communities, and it was treated as a crime, and so that flooded the prisons. I would be interested now to see if now that meth and things like that are affecting white people and causing those problems, you know, if they're starting to invest more and looking at it more as a health issue, as opposed to a criminal issue, I would be interested to see, if they're now making more resources available to treat the mental health, and then what is the demographics of the people that are receiving that assistance now based on race.
Absolutely. So now that you say that about the different epidemics, so when it was crack in the black community, oh, well, y'all criminals, we sending you to jail. But like you said, when the meth came in, now the fentanyl is the big thing, and it's called an epidemic now. And so they are making better strides towards um, substance abuse and mental health um, help, but definitely they're probably geared and pointed towards certain communities who have those issues. I'm not sure that fentanyl is a big thing that we have to deal with in the African American community. Whenever I see it, it is white middle class people, also the meth. And so I know they're making provisions to make sure that those people are helped with not only their substance abuse issues, but their mental health issues. So it is interesting to see who's going to be helped. What are the populations that they're targeting? Um, who like where are those different um, facilities going to be placed, housed? Are they going to be in only certain communities and not in other communities? So absolutely, access is always an issue when you're dealing with people who are in the African American community and trying to get access to things that we need, things that are necessary in our communities. Also, I heard you say something about the drugs causing the mental health. That happens sometimes, but also people with mental health issues self-medicate. And so the drugs go hand in hand with that because they don't want to do what the doctor is asking them to do, but they'll take street drugs to self-medicate. So that also comes up. So anybody else want to say anything to that before I move on? All right, next slide. And so staying with the criminalization of mental illness, jails and prisons have become America's de facto mental health facilities. However, they're not built for that, but so many people who are jailed have mental health issues. They're starting to add those programs into the prisons and the jails. Only 3 in 5 people, 63% with a history of mental illness, receive mental health treatment while incarcerated. So not everybody who is incarcerated will get the mental health help. Not all prisons and jails are equipped with those facilities, with those types of units that separate the mentally ill away from the people who are actually committing crimes. So think about that, where you are a mentally ill person, you're having a mental crisis, and people come to your house or come to you on the street and take you to jail, where you're going to be put with criminals who actually commit crimes. And so you're in jails or prisons with these people. You're not placed in a different housing unit. You're out in the public with them. So what type of abuse, these mental health patients that should be serving, being serviced as mental health patients, but now they have to actually live with and deal with on a daily basis criminals who can hurt them and do things to them because they are in there and they have their mental health issues. So it's kind of sad when you think about it. Rather than putting money towards more mental health issues or more mental health programs or hospitals, psychiatric hospitals, they prefer to put money into prisons and jails, and then they just pile everybody together, and that's how they service the mental health issues on the streets. Let's see. And then less than half of people, or 45%, with a history of mental illness receive mental health treatment while held in local jails. So less than 63% in the prisons and 45% in the jails are receiving mental health help. Okay, so this is where we get to our issues. And just note, Pastor, on video 1, we're stopping at 10:37 because it starts to get quite aggressive after that, and then video 2 stopping at 5:22.
All right, so those are just links. It's not embedded. So just give me about 10 seconds to switch screens when they come up.
They are schizophrenic.
Tried to kill myself about 17 times.
Paranoid.
This is a plot by the government.
And psychotic.
Thorazine me out, leave me for lost.
But they are not in mental hospitals. They are in prison.
Prisons have become the new asylums, the new state mental hospital facilities.
Tonight, Frontline takes an unprecedented journey inside one of America's largest prison systems.
Once they get out of control, you do have to use force on them.
And investigates the stark reality of locking thousands of the mentally ill behind bars.
The attitude has been, you lock people away, then they're no longer a problem.
Prison is simply not the place to provide mental health care.
Why have America's prisons become the new asylums?
You know, I didn't get your name. My name's Alex. What's yours?
Jesse Paulette from Corvala. On the other side, 3 courses, 450 degrees, molecule 3175 away from Luther.
Okay. Are you giving me directions?
Yeah, I'm giving you 5 minutes.
Okay.
Hey, Devon.
Yeah.
Are you on medications that you haven't taken today?
Yes.
Yes, you did, or
no? I did not take.
Are you out of them?
Yes, I am.
What apartment do you live in?
Apartment 18.
Apartment 18.
Yes, 1-8.
Very good.
Who do you live there with?
I sat there by myself.
Okay. Do you have a phone at your house?
No.
Okay. If something happened where you need to get hold of family in an emergency,
yes,
who would you call?
I would call. Nobody really. I don't have any family right now.
Do you have a brother or a sister or a mother or father?
No, I do not.
An aunt or an uncle that may be able to help you today?
No.
Okay.
Where are you from? What city?
I'm from, I don't know, brother.
Scenes like this have become all too familiar throughout America. As the nation's psychiatric hospitals shut down, police departments everywhere were left to handle the growing number of mentally ill on the streets.
Watch your head. Coming up here and open the door. I can't let you in. You guys are gonna kill me and all that. She thought we was gonna kill her. What's your name, sir?
Why'd she think that?
Didn't you know she's crazy?
Husband was telling her she just offer meds. So you guys just gonna do a voluntary thing tonight?
Yep.
She's set to go. She wants to go.
Once you had hundreds of thousands of people leaving the mental hospitals, they suddenly, obviously, didn't become mentally healthy. They went to the streets, they became homeless, and then they eventually began to cycle into the system that cannot say no.
Have you ever considered or attempted suicide? No. Do you plan to harm yourself now or while you're incarcerated?
Well, most of them are nonviolent crimes. They're crimes against property, the petty theft out of the local 7-Eleven store, or even a criminal trespass. A person with a mental issue goes in there to try and get shelter from the elements outside, and they start acting up. And the property owner, calls the police, and then as soon as the police step in, they end up bringing them to jail, and here we go.
Today, there are nearly 500,000 mentally ill being held in jails and prisons throughout America. That's 10 times the 50,000 that remain in psychiatric hospitals.
I want to see the doctor to get my mask. Get out of my face, you filthy bitch.
This massive incarceration of inmates with severe mental illness has created enormous problems for prisons across the country.
There was a failure in society. There was no safety net for all of these persons who were no longer being treated by mental health agencies. And as a result, many of those persons who would have been in state hospitals are now in state prisons. So in addition to being the director of the Department of Corrections, I became a de facto director of a major mental health system.
Ohio corrections officials agreed to give Frontline unprecedented access to their prison system to see firsthand the difficulties of coping with the thousands of mentally ill inmates in their custody.
Just feel like I'm suffering, man. I feel like I'm suffering every day. I just feel like I'm suffering. I feel like I'm just in a real small locked room. And no matter how much I kick on the door, no matter how much I scream, man, don't nobody hear me, man.
What about you, Mr. Simmons?
They say I'm paranoid schizophrenic.
Are you on forced medication?
Yeah.
What medications are you on?
This is group therapy at the maximum security prison in Lucasville, Ohio.
Didn't like a lot of things I've seen in my childhood.
A lot of things I've seen in my household start having hate inside of me.
Come here, man. Let me see your arms. Bring me here. I haven't got to see them. What's new? All these? These?
Yeah.
What's this? This new?
Yeah.
What drove you to this point, man? Last time I seen you was doing good.
The bottom dropped out. And I just couldn't think of nothing else.
16% of our prison population in the state of Ohio, which reflects basically a national average, are persons who've been diagnosed with a mental illness, which means that they require an awful lot of attention. Many of them require hospitalization. They require major regimens of psychiatric medications. And they are a population that would be at risk not only in the institutions, but when they leave the confines of our correctional facilities.
Ohio spent the last decade reforming their system and is now considered a model for providing mental health care behind bars.
I said, aha! Can we get a witness? Can we hear the Bible verse up there, Reverend Jack Back?
We've had inmates bang his head on the wall, scream, shout, yell, kicking the doors, kicking the bars. That go on forever. Throwing human waste on the range, that's something that happens regular. And if somebody new that would come in here and experience something like that, they'd probably turn right back around and leave. Say, I don't want to come back in this place. But, you get used to it after a while.
In Ohio, mentally ill inmates are separated from the prison's general population and housed in mental health units where they can be treated.
You have to have a little more patience here. You have to have a lot more patience here, not a little, because it gets pretty frustrating at times. Have to tell somebody to do something 3, 4, 5, 6 times before they do it. A lot of them simply don't understand the rules. If they're paranoid about something, they think somebody's out to get them. It's just a different world in here than it is in the rest of the prison. This is another world inside of a world.
You have this population of seriously mentally ill, and simply keeping them locked up isn't going to do any good for the inmates themselves or for the prison. So you bring the treatment part of it into it, and maybe this is the first time some of these guys have received treatment. We have medication here, we have the psychiatrist here, we have nurses here 24 hours a day. And some of the guys here probably have not had that level of care, maybe not ever in their lives.
Now, you haven't heard voices.
No.
But you do have some special abilities, right?
Yeah, mental telepathy.
Yeah, which is different than voices.
Yeah, it's a lot different, a lot more friendlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and who's the main person that you have telepathy with?
The main one is Miss Hillary Clinton now, and then the next one is George Bush. Then I talk to Miss Oprah Winfrey sometimes.
How is she friendly to you?
It's the power builder of my all well-being.
We've projected about 25 or 30% of those individuals that have a chronic mental illness will always need someone making sure that they take their medication, having somebody mediate in terms of interpersonal relationships that they might have with staff as well as have with other inmates, having a population or environment where people understand that illness and yet keep in mind what the security needs are.
All right, yeah. So before we move on, so my things that like jumped out at me when I watched this video, 500,000 mentally ill people locked up in the United States. Like that's 500,000 people that really need mental health care, but the way the US deals with them is just to lock them up in jails and prisons. Also just the man in the beginning, like he was just so lost. And so they're trying to help him. He has nobody to help him. A lot of times when the people have family, the family want to help, but they're mental illness is so severe and they act out so badly,
Meanwhile, long-term
then the family is not willing or not able to help like they would like to help. And so when the family's not able to help, there's nothing um, in the general population as far as care, long-term care for these people, then it makes it just really hard. They're out on the streets, they're by themselves, they're not getting either the meds or the counseling or the psychiatric help that they need. And so the best thing that the US can come up with is, oh, let's just put them in prison. So what are anybody else's thoughts on that first video?
Yeah, I don't even really see it. I mean, I think the number's just going to grow and grow and grow because, just there's so many, there's just so many things that affect, and so, affect mental illnesses. And, the young, it kind of affected me, the young guy, that had no connection to family. Because what the illness can do is it can truly damage relationships. Like I look at those guards. I mean, that's not their profession. They don't understand that. And I know sometimes you're just dealing with racist people, but most people just don't understand. And so, that guy that had no connection to family, I think the illness can damage relationship with families that just don't understand. And I know personally, with my family member, I was mad, just because of the way they were dealing with another family member that I was very protective over and cared about, and I wasn't able to get beyond that point until until I saw that person at a very low place, and then it kind of touched my emotions and everything, and I had empathy. But before, I saw that, you know, I just wasn't educated enough to have the empathy. I just saw it as just being mean, and didn't really see it as a sickness. And I think most families, end up that way when you see somebody, especially somebody that hadn't always been like that. If you've seen it like that all their life, you can kind of understand. But when, after, a while and messing with drugs, and then they become that way, it's difficult to have the love of God, and so families really have to be informed. Families have to be informed, and just kind of being able to be taken to a place to where you see it as a illness. And I think when you see it as an illness, you can begin to look at it differently. But I don't really see it getting any. I don't really see the numbers going down, and so I think our country does have to make that investment. And the thing that we never have the shortage of in this country is money and resources. It's just where do we direct it?
Exactly. We send millions and billions over to a war that has nothing to do with us in another country, but we have people here who are hurting, who are in need, and we don't want to put that money towards those people. So yeah, it's really sad. Um, I also, same family member, like you try to deal with the family member and understand the illness, and even a person working in mental health, after about 20 years, I was just like, I need a break. Like, this is too much. I can't anymore. And so I walked away. So for Ron to pick up and come help at the end has been great for that person. He's doing a great job trying to find housing and making sure he has somebody to check meds. So you just have to really be strong, because it's a lot, because they can be really ugly, say ugly things, do ugly things, and then you have to just kind of remember, hey, this is the illness, this is not necessarily the person, this is the illness. So just being able to make sure that families, loved ones are educated, like Reverend Pastor Ross said, just so you know how you can best support. And I just feel like it's not going to get any better with all the different drugs coming in. Also, blows to the head, people getting into fights, people getting into accidents also cause mental health issues. And so those type of things also, you know, bring about um, issues for people on top of all the drug stuff. So there's lots of ways that mental health can just kind of creep into your family, creep into your um, personal circle. But it's really good just to know how you can support that person and what you can do to support that person.
And
Anybody else?
I think families have to be, especially as black people, um, we know that the system, the way that our country is designed, it's not designed to help to really help us unless it just has to and something's exposed. And so I think that in our community, seeing the disproportionate numbers, we really have to find ways for our families to stay connected and be able to communicate to help out in situations like this um, because if families don't work together, you know, I saw it in our family. You know, I saw like when our grandmother, you know, got Alzheimer's or dementia, and then our aunts and uncles were able to be kind of almost separated. Our aunts, uncles, mom, you know, they were able to be separated because they weren't on the same page, because you know all of them loved the person, but they couldn't really understand because dementia is a big deal too, you know, and I don't think I don't think we're at that point to where we're trying to throw people with dementia in prison, but maybe so, but it's still something that if you don't understand it, it could really tear. And what made me think about this when you said you had to take a break, and I think in dealing with that person in our family, you know, I think it got the best of our mom, you know, and affected her. It started getting the best of you, and so family really has to work together, or in the end it'll just be that person, the only one standing. And so families have to figure out a way to work together and communicate, understand what's going on, and really be there for one another, so that the people that have the task of caring for a person that that they don't all start dropping off because of the stress and the weight of caring for a person that's dealing with mental illness.
Anybody else?
Hi, Katrina. This is Irma. Good evening, everyone.
Hi.
Hey, Irma.
I was listening about the prisons being the new asylum, and I thought about what you said about sending money to countries that we have nothing to do with, and people are capitalizing on people with mental illness in prisons because we have privately owned prisons and they're not concerned with the person's mental health. They just want the body so they can get the money. Yeah. So there's another problem. And I think Florida has about 27 privately owned or 27 prisons where they've hired private corporations. And these are people that are just interested in numbers because the more bodies they have, they could care less whether they have a mental illness or not. They just want to capitalize on the number of people that they can get.
Irma, just a wild question. I mean, I don't know if you have the answer. Do you have any idea of what that percentage is right now? That 27 out of, you know how many total we have, or
the article said that Florida is one of 27 states that use private corporations to run some of their correctional facilities. So I'm not exactly sure what the percentage is.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah,
but
that
would be interesting.
definitely is an issue. Yeah.
And it just tell you how serious the government is at helping the issue. You know, are we just trying to build more wealth for other people, or are we really trying to rehabilitate people. And I think the first is probably the goal of our country. It has to serve the country's interest in order for the countries to make an investment in it. And so with those, when we send war money to other countries to fight a war, there's an interest we have in that, and we may not have an interest in rehabilitating a group of people that we traditionally hadn't even cared about anyway. So, but we can
Right.
we can direct funds to make people that we do care about generationally wealthy through these private prisons.
Right,
Yes.
right. Yeah. So, and then with you guys saying that, I don't know. I just um remember the mass incarceration. So who are these mentally ill people? Who are the majority of the people in prisons? It is Black and brown people. So obviously that's not going to be a big concern for people who don't look like us, who are not really concerned about what's going on with us.
I think about a friend of mine. She was actually in the young adult ministry when I was a young adult pastor here, but she became the state attorney in Orange County. And so there were things that she started doing, trying to not use the prison system, for things that it didn't need to be used for, to give people other options and alternative ways to correct their behavior rather than just piling everybody in these private prisons. And the governor, had her removed from office because they didn't feel that she was hard enough on criminals. And and that's we got to figure out a way to get around these demons that we deal with.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Dr. Gillis. Good evening, everyone.
Good
Hi.
evening.
I think primarily our penal institutions now are for creating free labor.
Mhm.
One thing I wanted to say, but then I'm just so grateful that I'm on the line tonight with this because I'm in love with emotional literacy. And in looking at your statistics, it really just proves that the majority, well, first of all, mental illness and emotional illiteracy are like twin towers.
Yes.
Not, but not one time in your presentation did I hear anyone's even think about emotional damage, emotional trauma,
Mhm.
because it actually is a reflection of the same. What I saw tonight was a whole bunch of people. I don't know if you were there for any of my presentations, but jugs that are actually full. And
Yeah.
until we realize that a lot of people are misdiagnosed, because the script practically and scripturally, what you have said tonight is just so beautiful. It just proves that God is so amazing because we are talking about the mental part of the person, but it's out of the abundance of your heart that your brain or your mind calculates, so you speak or you act or you live out of that whatever's in your heart. And most of these people have traumas that have broken their hearts. And even in therapy, I didn't hear anyone say, well, what happened to you when you were a little boy?
Mhm.
You know, it's never it, the history behind the thing that we dig up. But when we learn that emotional literacy is actually a masterful piece. My very first week workshop that I went in, I boohoo cried. I'm telling you, because I could not believe that that was not a part of the curriculum, especially for the inner city, because we are not only physically, emotionally, generationally, but we're spiritually trapped, traumatized. We have generational trauma that we are born into, and then we live day to day in trauma. So, emotional literacy, I think, is one of the most important partners. I'm working with a mental health clinician out in Texas right now, and we're marrying this thing because I think that it's a two-edged sword. It's a double barrel shotgun when we come into our inner cities with the mental health and the emotional piece, because we leave the person whole. When
Mhm.
we when they go through these processes, they can actually live. Cut you in the scriptures. Remember the mad man of Gadara that was cutting himself crazy on the mountain, and Jesus cast the devil. So the body of Christ have to realize too, a lot of this is spiritual.
Absolutely.
It's demonic.
Absolutely.
And so if we're not ready for that kind of a warfare, we're going to, like you said, it's going to intensify, it's going to grow because the devil is running wild. But we do have the opportunity to make an impression. And so I would love, my goal is to train facilitators in every man's world if they never use it. But when your children are small, that if we can teach them that you have an emotional part of your life that, you have to make sure that it stays empty. Because if you don't, it's going to flood into your brain and make you act a way that you shouldn't act. I can remember when I did my first work with the emotional drug, I said things from back in 10th grade that just supernaturally came up out of me that I did not realize I still remembered. I could feel it, the spit on my face at GHS when they would spit on us from the balcony. And I didn't realize how much that had devastated me until I started talking. So, talking is therapeutic, and I'm going to stop, but I love this work. I do. Thank you for sharing it.
Thank you for your comments. Yeah, and now that you say that, when I was counseling in the Marion County School District, they tried to make sure that they brought emotional literacy to us, and they brought up this thing called ACEs, where you think about like they give you questions, and if you answer so many of these questions, you had a pretty traumatic life, like childhood. So I'm going through and I'm answering. And so I get to about 5 and I'm like, but I don't feel like I have trauma. So it also affects people differently. So I'm thinking, oh, I had this nice little Brady Bunch family. And then I look at the ACEs and I'm like, wow, a lot of stuff happened. But as as you are, different personalities, even growing up in the same house, like some people are able to get past that, move past that, be successful still, and some people get stuck and they're not able to move past and they're not able to deal with life, and so they do have their own issues. So it was just interesting to see that, how they went all the way, like you said, back to childhood, things that had happened in childhood, that affect who you are today. So absolutely.
Exactly, because our emotions have no sense of time.
Mm-hmm.
We were raped when we were 8. We remember it today just like we were 8.
Yep.
And until we work it through, it's going to always affect us, and we'll leak. We'll have displaced anger. We'll short fuse, and nobody can understand why you're wilding out. And it's all these things that are triggering it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's go ahead and get started with that second video so we can talk about it and kind of wrap up our discussion.
This podcast is brought to you by Al Jazeera.
Healthcare's forgotten patients. Millions of Americans left to languish in prison or survive without treatment on the street. As the nation struggles to reform healthcare, who's fighting on behalf of the mentally ill in America? And is anyone in Washington listening?
These are the dark ages for people who are severely mentally ill.
People with severe mental illness used to be housed in state-run asylums. But in the 70s, most of those were closed down. The doors simply flung open, their patients released. But to where? Many to the streets, and that often led into the hands of the law. So that hospitals were replaced by jails, and those who would have been patients are now inmates. I'm Josh Rushing. This week on Fault Lines, we go deep inside one of the nation's largest prison systems to examine the criminalization of the mentally ill.
Lester, we're gonna get you a shower.
I think it's a very bad commentary on the state of our society that we are not taking care of the people who are least able to take care of themselves.
Hi.
In a way, we're going backwards in time. We're going back to an era when we treated mentally ill people in a jail setting.
Often these people who are mentally ill in jails are beaten by other prisoners, sometimes beaten by guards, sometimes left for days in solitary confinement, hallucinating. It's a very serious and a very tragic situation that we have.
The prisons are not really set up to manage the mental illness. Most prisons are brick and mortar institutions, and their main thing is to serve and protect. And they just want to keep you from getting out.
We are making criminals out of people without enough mental capacity to be responsible for what they do.
It's like having cancer. It's an illness.
And do you think you should be punished for that?
No. No, I think I should be helped.
They're psychotic, delusional, and often paranoid. But to understand how people with mental illness came to make up more than half the U.S. prison population, you need to start here, in the nation's parks, bus stations, and streets. Homelessness has become a part of the landscape in nearly every major city in America. But if you look closely at the individuals forced to live on the street, it's often more than just poverty at play. No one knows exactly what percentage of the homeless suffer from mental illness. Some advocacy groups estimate the number could be as high as 80%. It's a sad reality that for many leads to eventual confrontations with the law. Houston, Texas, the fourth largest city in America, has one of the nation's largest homeless populations. Incidents across the country where police officers have shot and killed mentally ill individuals have forced law enforcement here to rethink their approach.
You know, as years passed, we decided to take advantage of the resources in the community, specifically in the mental health community. And now we are much more professional in our response, in that we realize that jail is not the answer.
To see how this new program works, Fault Lines followed some of these specially trained teams into action.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Houston's home to the nation's largest CIT unit. CIT stands for Crisis Intervention Teams. The program partners cops with mental health clinicians.
It's not trying to get anybody on the spot whatsoever, but what we're trying to do is help. I want to make sure you're okay, all right? We see
Steve Augustine is a CIT officer with 15 years in the Houston Police Department.
Okay, look, I'm just going to make sure you don't have any weapons on you, okay? You're okay, all right? I'm not your enemy, okay? You're not going to jail. You're just going to the hospital, okay? Just going to the hospital. Just for safety measures, okay?
This man was found by the police wandering through traffic on a downtown street.
Obviously, he's in crisis, so we're going to take him down to MPC, and MPC is basically going to get him stabilized, all right? And then basically later on, they take him to the hospital and then probably released out so he can, start life over again.
Starting over may be tougher than it seems. This man may be headed to a hospital today, but too often public hospitals are underfunded and overcrowded, meaning that if they offer any psychiatric services at all, it's only for the short term.
I'm gonna let the window down so it won't be so hot, okay?
Meanwhile, long-term...
Yeah, so looking at that video, just listening to how the police officers, a lot of times when they respond, those mentally ill people are often shot, often killed, and just looking at them in the prison system. If you already have mental health issues and then you're in the prison with other people with issues, they're screaming, they're yelling, there's no peace, like that can only make your situation worse. So I think it's just really sad how the U.S. Is not funding or putting resources towards more psychiatric help, more things that could help people who are in crisis, more things that could help people who are on the street because of their mental illnesses, like some type of, even if it was studio housing in a very tall building somewhere that people could go be in, be residential in, and get the help that they need. Like, how much would that really cost, as opposed to sending millions to somewhere that is of no interest to the American people? It may be of interest in politics, but we have no interest in it.
I think I look at this as a serious so we look at our iPhones, we look at other things that we use, and we know how important it is to update. And but sometimes our systems, because we may not really be sincerely trying to do what we say that the system is supposed to do. I don't think that we might be as committed to understanding the need to update. And so when you think about police, because we, even with policing in America, I mean, it started to control us, and make sure that that we were caught if we tried to run away, and and how that city right there was saying that a police officer was paired with a therapist or an expert. I think where you invest, your work as far as your workforce and things like that, you got to have people in there that understand it. You can't just take somebody that has the training, of what police officers are traditionally trained to do, and expect them to be able to do it. You got to invest and make sure that that you know that that you're equipped to really help the problem. And so we might have to even, we have people have to rethink, you know, who they employ, how they recruit people to deal with whatever the issue that on paper that they say that they are designed to do. So it's going to take just a real serious rethinking how we do what we do, and with this just brute force and strong arming somebody doesn't fix the problem. People have other issues that we got to make an investment in who we hire and how we're designed if we're really going to deal with the issue that we wrote down and said that we wanted to accomplish on paper.
Yep. And so, like Sister Irma said, I think as long as people are making money off of prisons, I don't see anybody jumping to make some resources to help these 500,000 mentally ill people who are in jails and prison, probably more today, depending on where that data came from. So as long as they're making money off of it, I don't see any type of update of the system. Um, I think we've had a presentation before where we said the system is working exactly the way the system is set up to be worked, where people are making money off of these prisons, people are being locked up, majority of them Black and brown people. And for my next slide, I just want to leave with you guys, like Dr. Gillis said, it's just free labor from slave to criminal with one amendment. So they're getting free labor out of it. Um, they don't have to call it slavery. We just put you in prisons. We get some type of free labor out of you, and we make money off of you. So, any closing or final thoughts?
I think one thing that we can do in our communities is, because we are sought out to help with different things, and so there's funding to do different things. A lot of us go after the funding for the money, but if we tried to partner to deal with issues that we truly have in our community, and got the best and the brightest people from our communities that knew how to do what it is that we try to go get the funding for that we don't really know how to do, um, we I think that could help out, in small ways and make small leaps of bounds. Say, for instance, say there was in the same way that these private companies, are receive funding to do certain things, within our ministries and with nonprofits in our community, even people that make a profit, um, for the good of the community, go in and pursue this funding, but don't just pursue it just so I have funding, but partner with the right people that really truly know how to fix this problem. Because I can get funds to do something. I operate on small levels like summer camps and stuff. But if I go and get funding to run a summer camp, but I'm not really good at empowering children or helping children, I didn't really do the best, most effective service that I could. And so I think we can look at some of our organizations in our communities and ministries and stuff like that, saying, what, this is a need. And if I'm able to go and get the funding that these private prisons are able to go and do, at a level that I have the capacity to operate at, maybe on a smaller scale that can grow, we can begin offering some of these services, because we actually care about the problem, as opposed to depending on people that don't care about the problem, depending on them to fix the problem when fixing the problem doesn't really help out their end goal.
Right, right. Anybody else? Okay, so I'm glad you guys were all on to give your input to talk about this issue, the criminalization of mental health, and using our prison systems and jail systems to house the mentally ill instead of putting in resources to help them. It's been very interesting. I thank you guys for attending, and Pastor, I'm gonna leave it with the last word with you.
All right. Thank you so much for the presentation. I thank everybody that participated with us, and everybody that's online. Make sure you share this because somebody could benefit. A lot of different areas of people and roles in our society could benefit from something like this. But we don't just get this information just to get it. We get it to think about it and wonder what we could do to serve God better, with the information that we get. Bible says, "And all that get understanding." So God bless you. Thank you, Katrina. We're still praying for you and trusting miracles in your life. And
Absolutely.
thank you everybody else for joining in. God bless you and have a great one.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.